Hey yo guys, I'm sure you would have seen the thumbnail. Obviously you're here to make sure you're not hurting your lower back or you're trying to avoid lower back pain when you're going into hinge movements, okay? Now I'm going to show you how to do the bent over row and the RDL, as that is where I get a lot of questions about where people are struggling with lower back pain when going into those movements, okay? Now first of all, I'm going to show you the RDL, which is a very similar setup to the bent over row, but just misses one key element, which I'm going to show you, okay? Now, first thing you can do, set up the bar to just below hip height. A lot of time when I speak to people and I look at their form, a lot of the time they're picking up off the ground. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this, but sometimes, especially when you're trying to learn the movement pattern, starting from the top and being able to think about the hips back portion of the movement is going to help a lot with alleviating back pain. When you're coming from the floor, it's more of a pushing movement to start off with, and sometimes not being able to get into the right position will start to bring on a little bit of back pain. So my suggestion, especially if you're trying to really figure out and nail your technique, is get the bar set up just below hip height so you can walk out and go straight from the top. Another one, where to place the feet, okay? We're definitely not out here. We're definitely not past shoulder width, okay? We want to be inside shoulder width. How far inside varies for a lot of people. Obviously, we don't want to be feet together as well, but it'll vary for a lot of people. Generally, I say, if you were to jump maximally, so as high as you can, where would that feet placement be? It wouldn't be out here. That's not a maximal jump. So think about if you were to jump as high as you can, where would you place your feet? Roughly, that's where you want it, okay? Also, another one is you can have your toes slightly pointed out. I find that it helps for a lot of people to be able to clear the hips, okay? And we can also push the knees out slightly as well in that position, rather than here. Some people find it a little bit jammy. Now, all of these cues that I'm giving you, we are going off an average here, okay? So some people might be a little bit more toes out. Some people might be dead straight. Some people might be a little bit wider. Some people might be a little bit closer, but we're not at the extremes. As I said, we're not feet together. We're not in a sumo stance. We're just finding the averages of that, okay? And you figure out and work where you are. It's only going to be slight adjustments though, okay? Next up is when we're going into the movement pattern, we are pushing the hips back, okay? Now, a lot of people, when they go into an RDL, is they're thinking about knees are coming forward, okay? Any hip hinge movement, we want a vertical shin, okay? We don't want the knees coming over the toe. We want a vertical shin. To be able to do that, we need to be able to push the hips back to get a lot of tension in the hamstrings, okay? Especially in an RDL. When we're doing a hip hinge, when we're doing an RDL, the hamstrings are aiding with the hip extension, okay? So they're helping the hips come through. If we just bend forward here, oh Jesus, I almost just fell over doing that. If we just bend forward here, it's going to be harder for the hamstrings to come in as a hip extensor, okay? And therefore you'll find a lot more lower back activation, okay? So thinking about trying to push the hips back so that when you're coming out of the RDL, the hamstrings can help with that hip extension, which is what we're trying to train. Also, before going into the movement, you want to get a slight little upper back activation, okay? You want to make sure that we're pretty rock solid everywhere except through the hips, okay? So by thinking of a piece of paper being under the armpits and squeezing down on that piece of paper, okay, it's going to get a slight bit of upper back and lat activation where we're going to be able to lock the upper body up a little bit when we're going into that RDL, okay? Now, that's the one thing that you won't do when going into a bent over row, because we want to have a bit more freedom through here to make sure that we're getting the stretch and also we'll make sure that we're getting the squeeze, okay? Now, we're going to put it all together. So we roughly want the bar at just below hip height. You want your hands just past shoulder width apart, making sure your feet are in the right position. So we roughly want shoulder width. You can have a slight toes out if you like, if that feels more comfortable for you. Then from there, squeezing down on that piece of paper, getting that engagement through the lats, okay? And then you want to think about hips back, pushing those hips to the back room, to the back wall, getting that stretch in the hammy. Once you get that maximal stretch, maximal tension, pull the hips through, okay? We don't need to go past maximal tension, maximal stretch, and go into lumbar flexion, okay? So that is another thing that I'll see as well, is people, when they go into the bottom of the RDL, trying to get further, trying to get more range of motion or more stretch on the hamstrings, but really all they're doing is just bending through the lower back, okay? It is a hamstring exercise. We don't need to be bending through the lower back, okay? We've already reached that point where we're getting a maximal stretch on the hamstrings. Now we just pull back up. Main reason I think of this is a lot of people think of ego. They also think that they should be going to the ground. They also think that they don't have enough hamstring flexibility. When really, yes, hamstring flexibility has something to do with it, but everyone is put together different. What if you had arms that were inch shorter than people your height? How are you going to be able to find the ground? What if you had legs shorter than people your height? You're going to be finding it easier to get the ground. A lot of the times it doesn't matter about the hamstring flexibility. A lot of the times it's just how people are put together. Some people, as I said, some people have shorter arms, some people have shorter legs. It's got nothing to do with the degree of hip flexion that we're getting on the hamstrings. It's got nothing to do with that. So just be mindful, think about what you need, and that is to get maximal tension and maximal stretch on the hamstrings and then pull the hips through. Okay, now that's how you perfect the RDL, guys. Don't try to get caught up in trying to find the ground all the time. There's definitely no prerequisite that you have to find the ground. Obviously, a deadlift is different, but for an RDL, where we're focusing on hamstring, or stiff leg deadlift, same thing, where we're focusing on hamstring, we don't need to find the ground. We need to find that stretch point. We need to find maximal tension on the hamstrings. Okay, next up, for the bent over row, we're going to do everything exactly the same, except we're not going to worry about that lock on the lats in, okay? Because we need that movement to be able to row. So setting it up, hands roughly past shoulder width apart. Again, you can go a little bit slightly wider if you prefer, and then if that feels nice for you. Again, feet shoulder width apart, toes slightly pointed out. Now you want to get that hip hinge, okay? Big tension in that hamstring, okay? A lot of the times when I see people going into a bent over row, they either go into a squat position and pull from here, or they just bend straight over and pull from there, okay? We need to get the hamstrings involved. The more tension you have in the hamstrings, the less tension you're gonna have on your lower back. So push those hips back. From there, drive up, squeeze the shoulder blades together, pull those elbows up to the roof, and just maintain that bent over position, okay? If we can get into that strong position where we're pushing the hips back, okay, getting a lot of tension in the hamstrings, you can hang out in that position for as long as you need, okay, and load it up. Your hamstrings will be stronger than what you're able to pull, okay? But we just need to get into that position first, and that's what I'm finding a lot of people aren't doing. They either just bend straight forward, where there's a lot of tension on the lower back, okay, because the weight's so far out here as well, instead of pushing the hips back where the weight is closer to the body, or they're going into a squat pattern and they're just pulling from here, okay? So a couple of things to work on there, guys. Hopefully these tips have given you something to work on, and hopefully they will help. I'm sure they will, okay? Leave any comments in if you found this successful, or if you would like any more information about it. But till next time, guys, thanks for tuning in.